Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for having us here. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to Stephen in New Zealand.
Good morning.
It's 7 a.m. Good effort. And good to see some familiar faces and familiar names on here as well, which is that's nice to see. And in terms of the synergies that Simon spoke about, just to reiterate the synergies, because part of our purpose is to create more humane ways of working. Very similar, same words pretty much as Simon's words. Creating a more humane world of work is what we're about, and we're about the outcomes, hence better, value, sooner, safer, happier. It's not agile for agile's sake. It's around better, value, sooner, safer, happier. And the happier bit is happier colleagues, happier customers, a happier society, and a happier climate. It's also the planet and society as well. So introductions first of all. So I am the lead for business agility globally at Deloitte. I joined Deloitte 2 years ago. I joined from industry, from financial services. Previously, I was head of ways of working at Barclays for 4 years. And I've got getting on for 30 years experience of agile and lean ways of working. Myles?
Hi, yes, I'm Myles Ogilvie. I am a career project program guy. I come up through that route. I've spent 13 years at Barclays prior to 2019, where I was leading the investment bank for several years in the ways of working space, and I then moved through Deloitte and now running Sooner Safer Happier as an organisation to help other organisations. Simon or John?
Hi, my name is Zsolt Berend. I worked with Myles, John and Simon at Barclays for many years, and I have 15 years of experience as a co-trainer and currently as a product owner for Nationwide Building Society.
And finally, Simon Aurora here again. Worked at Barclays for many years, 15 years I was there. Worked with John, Zsolt and Myles for the last 3 or 4 of those, implementing ways of working. My background, I'm a software developer. I currently head up enterprise architecture and developer experience in Saxo Bank in Denmark. This is my Brexit escape. Yeah, I am super passionate about ways of working. I co-lead on that here at Saxo as well. I lead, I guess I give a technical bent to the Sooner Safer Happier initiative, but again, it's all about humane ways of working across the board, regardless of tech or not.
Great, thank you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to share some of the philosophy around better, value, sooner, safer, happier. We're going to share some lessons learned the hard way. We're going to talk about anti-patterns and patterns. And as I'm sure most of you know, there's no such thing as best practice. There's no one size fits all. Change is unique. It's emergent. That said, there are approaches that are generally more successful and will give you a tailwind. And there are approaches which are generally more likely to give you a headwind and make a hard job harder. So we're going to share our lessons learned the hard way and the mistakes that we've made. And this is in line with the book, Sooner Safer Happier, which came out yesterday, available in all formats after about 2.5 years. Delighted to have achieved that outcome. So before we do that, we're going to start with a Mentee survey in order to find out a little bit more about you and your context and your experiences. So if you could get a device or on your desktop or laptop, and if you could go to mentee.com and enter the code 678977. Alternatively, as I can see David was doing, hold your camera up to the QR code and point it at the QR code and it will take you straight to the right page. And then, actually, I'll just leave that on the screen for a second, just in case there's anyone wants to capture that QR code. And what you should see is you should see this question: who would you rather have lunch with? Can I just see a nod from somebody? Yep, excellent, thank you. So this is a test question. This is a warm-up question just to check you've got onto Mentee. I can see we've had 29, 30 responses so far, 35, 40. Oh, you're good. You're good. Wow, this is the quickest group. I suspect most of you are using Mentee quite often, I'm guessing. No, I see a shake of the head. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. It normally takes longer than this. Right, 46 people. I'm going to do the grand reveal. Michelle Obama. Most people want to have lunch with Michelle. Oh, poor Queenie. Only 6 people for the Queen. Don't want to give her coronavirus. 12 people for Elon. Okay, Elon number 2. Angelina Jolie, number 9. Oh dear, Boris. Oh dear, Boris. No mates, Boris. 2 people for lunch with Boris. There we go, good. So Michelle is the winner, and I can see we have a total of 48 responses. So that's great, that's fantastic. Now, going on to the next question. So this question is on the why. And this, in particular, this is why change. Why different ways of working? Why do anything at all? So if you could think of a context, it could be the company you're currently working at, or working with, or working for. It might be a previous company you worked at, but think of an organization that you either are working at or work for. And then if you could answer these questions. So first of all, was there a clear articulation of why change at that organization? On the left, not at all. On the right, very much. The second question is, was there explicit colleague engagement on why change? Or was it more of a top-down, we're going to change? The third question is, was there a clear articulation of the desired business outcomes? The fourth question is, were those outcomes measured and made transparent? And then the fifth question is, was it a case of agile for agile's sake, where you could substitute the word DevOps, cloud, or digital transformation in that sentence? DevOps for DevOps' sake, cloud for cloud's sake, and so on. So I'm gonna not do the grand reveal just yet. I can see we've got 36 responses, 38. Let's see if we can get it up to 40. 39. 40, there we go. Let's have a look. Let's see what the score's on the door. Okay, clear articulation of why change. That's interesting. You can see the shape of the blue is around the middle. So we've got a fairly clear spread. So some organizations are good at that. It's not particularly skewed, 3.1, pretty much down the middle. Colleague engagement on the why change, definitely skewed to the left, as in not really, below the median. A clear articulation of desired business outcomes, that's a really interesting shape. We've got a peak in the no and a peak in the yes. We don't have a lump in the middle. So that's an interesting one. So that's suggesting that with this group of 45 people, it's either yes there is, or no there isn't, not very much down the middle. Measuring those outcomes, very clearly not being measured and made transparent, or maybe they're being measured but just not made transparent. Very clear skew to the left. And then agile for agile's sake, that is most definitely loaded to the no, as in not agile for agile's sake. Now if that's correct, if that's not at all, then that's a good sign. It's a good sign if that's not agile for agile's sake, DevOps for DevOps' sake, but it's a focus on the outcomes. So we've got the clear outlier there, I think, is measuring the outcomes and making them transparent. That's very clearly loaded to one end. So thank you for that. That's very helpful. Moving on to the next question. The next question is how. So we've looked at the why, now the how. And the first question is, how much of it is inflict over invite, the highest paid person's opinion? The second question is, how much of it is one size fits all? The third question is, in your context, how much is it a case of doing agile over exhibiting agility? What I mean by that, if it isn't obvious, is you're not doing Scrum properly, or religiously following a framework rather than exhibiting genuine agility. The fourth one is it run as a transformation project with a start date and an end date? The fifth one is it scaling framework or tooling led rather than culture led? And the final one is the level of psychological safety. So I can see we've had 33, 34, 36, 38, 39, 41. Right, let's have a look. Scores on the door. Hippo, oh, interesting. Hippo mandate, inflict over invite. Yes, look at the shape of the blue over to the right. We are definitely seeing an inflict over invite, hippo mandate. We're doing agile, we're doing, my words, we're doing an agile transformation. Off we go. Definite for one size fits all, we're definitely seeing a skew to the right, very much one size fits all. That's interesting. That's interesting. So taking one approach, one set of practices, I'm interpreting in that case. Doing agile, very strongly a shift to the right, very strongly a focus there on doing agile, doing Scrum, doing a scaling framework. That's a very clear skew in the data. Transformation project with an end date, interestingly, looks like the majority is no. So that's a good sign. So it's not run like a waterfall project with a start date and an end date, even if it is mandating one size fits all. Scaling framework or tooling led, that has a skew from the shape of the purple over to the right. So we are seeing the majority is being scaling framework or tooling led. Psychologically safe, on the whole, that is skewed to the left. So on the whole, no, not psychologically safe, not able to experiment and learn fast. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Now, for me, running this a number of times, that's a strong, with this sample population of 41 people, that's a strong set over there to the right at the top three, stronger than normal in terms of infliction, one size fits all, and doing agile. And we're definitely seeing a strong lack of psychological safety. Not surprisingly, and I'm sure for those of you that do this a lot, are in this space a lot, not surprisingly, unfortunately, that tends to be the norm. This unfortunately tends to be normal. And this is absolutely what Better Value, Sooner, Safer, Happier is trying to do a better job of, and trying to get past some of these things that we're seeing here. So finally, what I would like you to do, this is free text field. And if you could enter multiple times. Please could you enter like one anti-pattern and one pattern per entry. And if you could start it either with the word anti-pattern or pattern, or start it with the initial AP or P. You can submit as many times as you like. Please could you submit anti-patterns or patterns that you have observed, felt, lived, experienced. So the anti-patterns are approaches which don't help to achieve the outcomes, and the patterns are the things that do help to achieve better business outcomes. Great, I can see they're coming in now. So I'm just going to start looking at some of these. So first, anti-pattern is cost-saving driven initiative. Yes, that's a fairly common one that we see, that I see. You'll notice in better value, sooner, safer, happier, very deliberately, nowhere is there the word cheaper. It's not better value, cheaper, sooner, safer, happier. Very, very, very explicitly. Anti-pattern, one size fits all. Anti-pattern, separate testing function. That sounds like an impediment to flow. Anti-pattern, command and control approach. I'm guessing lack of psychological safety. Diktat. Pattern, value stream focus, that's good. Directives from leaders and low level of autonomy and empowerment for teams. So an anti-pattern, back to the culture of fear, by the sounds of it, the culture of command and control. And anti-pattern, old habits are good. That's interesting. So I'm guessing from that one that is people viewing old habits as being a good thing. Small group decides the process for the many. Okay, so kind of ivory tower, behind, I'm guessing behind closed doors, in isolation, small group of people decide what to do, inflicted upon everyone else. So no colleague engagement. Anti-pattern, employees' fear of change. Letting go of perceived control. Yeah, that's a big one. People, especially when it comes to, I guess there's control and there's fiefdoms as well. And I guess there's a learning there around actually having a better form of control, because it's, as whoever wrote that has written, it's perceived control. Another anti-pattern, organizations are reluctant to accept agile ways of working. Pattern, employees are curious and enthusiastic to explore and grow. That's good. That's good. Pattern, colleague engagement. Anti-pattern, engineering driven, not got product along. Okay, so that sounds like it's kind of local optimization within engineering. Anti-pattern, waterfall, high expectations of perfection on launch. Okay, perfect is the enemy of good. A focus on tools and not people. Volatile roadmap. And I'm going to stop there. There's loads of really good, we've got loads in there. There's loads, that's fantastic. Just scrolling down to the bottom, no understanding of MVP, calling tech agility, business agility, installing frameworks, like installing an operating system. Team prefers old ways of working and don't have to take any responsibility, backseat driving. Great, thank you. So that's very helpful. Lots of very common themes in there. So I'm now going to switch back to the PowerPoint deck. And now going to talk through kind of some of the top anti-patterns and patterns that we observe, and we can kind of correlate that back to the Mentee poll. So the first one is, as we saw with some of those anti-patterns, focus on the outcomes first and foremost. Better value, sooner, safer, happier. The story here, wind the clock back to 2015, and we're leading on ways of working at my previous employer. And in year one, we ran an agile transformation. We called it an agile transformation. I was the head of the agile transformation. We were measuring fluency levels, 1, 2, 3, 4. How agile are you? It was stupid. It was a mistake. I wouldn't do it again. Because it's cargo cult. We had people called product owners and scrum masters with stand-ups and retrospectives and post-it notes and Kanban boards. But you know what? The outcomes weren't improving because it was new labels. On most cases, it was new labels on the same old behavior. And we were measuring the wrong thing. We were measuring, do you have a product owner? Are you doing stand-ups? And so on and so on. It wasn't quite that bad. We had some good measures in there as well. So going from year one to year two, so year one, the evangelists were on board, you know, the agile bubble, people who got it, had worked that way before, no problem at all, agile community of practice, hell yes. But as we got into the laggards, the late majority, it was most definitely hell no, you know, and the A word carries baggage, the word agile carries baggage. It's like, no, not for us. 3 previous failed attempts in our business unit. No, sorry, not going to do that. So we pivoted. And we focused on, hang on a minute, it's not agile for agile's sake. That's not the end. It's a means to an end. And actually what we're trying to achieve is better, value, sooner, safer, happier. And what that is, better is quality. So, and it's quality in your context. It could be incidents in IT. It could be straight through processing errors. It could be manual rework. It's whatever is failure demand in your context. Value is the reason you're in business, measured through OKRs, objectives and key results, where the key results, the leading and lagging, are leading and lagging value measures. Sooner is lead time, throughput and flow efficiency. So lead time is the time from starting work on something to getting it into the hands of a consumer. Throughput is the number of items of value over a given period of time. And flow efficiency is the amount of time that work is being worked on versus work is waiting. Most large organizations have a flow efficiency of 10% or less, which means that work is waiting 90% of the time. Safer is continuous compliance, agile, not fragile. This is GDPR, information security, any mandatory risk stories that you have to implement in your organization as per your policies and standards. And happier is happier colleagues, customers, citizens, and climate, as I said at the beginning of this talk. And this is what you measure. And this is what we measured. We pivoted to measuring these. You look at the vector metric over time. You're less interested in the absolute measure. You're more interested in the trend. You're more interested in the improvement trends over time. And what we observed after 3.5 years of doing this across 80,000 people globally, across business, IT, HR, compliance, everything, the whole organization in scope, is we saw a 20 times improvement on average on quality. The failure demand reduced by a factor of 20. We saw a 3 times improvement on average on lead time, throughput, and flow efficiency. So on average, teams were 3 times quicker to learn, 3 times quicker to pivot, 3 times less sunk cost fallacy. The best teams had a 20 times improvement in terms of lead time. Safer, we saw a positive compliance trend. So we saw a reduction in compliance breaches. We saw a reduced impact radius. So when there was a compliance issue, the impact was smaller. And speaking to the subject matter experts in those roles, they went from spending 80% of their time reactively, fixing things that had already broken, to 80% of their time proactively, avoiding things breaking in the first place. So not a conversation at the beginning of a waterfall project and a conversation at the end, and then 6 months of unplanned work, which is what used to happen. Instead, it's little and often conversation, avoiding the unexpected in the first place. And happier, we saw the highest ever colleague engagement scores, and that was measured through an external UView survey. So people were happier. It was more humane. It was a better world of work. And people were happier because they were seeing people were actually seeing the fruit of their labor. You're actually seeing the value you're producing on a regular cadence, and you're closer to the customer in your multidisciplinary teams with a greater degree of psychological safety and more empowerment and more autonomy. And we saw positive client net promoter score trends. The anti-pattern is, as we saw in that Mentee survey, the infliction of a capital A, capital T, agile transformation, one size fits all. Everybody do Scrum or Safe or Less or Nexus or Scrum at Scale or whatever, rather than optimizing to the outcomes in your context. And back to the point around data, this is what we measured. We made it transparent. We had a dashboard which anybody could access, and once a month, Zsolt and I used to send out a top-level one-pager which showed the aggregate trend by top-level business unit. And so it was, very clearly, you wouldn't want to be necessarily one of the business units who were the least improved on that. And in year 1, we had targets, which was a bad thing because we had gaming of the system, and we had cargo cult. Year 2 onwards, we dropped targets and we just looked for a positive trend. More of the psychology from Beyond Budgeting and Beata Bogsness around relative ranking. Myles.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so the second pattern is achieving big through small. And this means thinking big, but starting small and learning fast. And the flip side of that, the anti-pattern, is the Big Bang transformation. And there's a few forms that can take, but for example, the organizations where new job descriptions are defined, perhaps based on a framework, and people are asked to reapply for their jobs. And once the jobs are filled, then the transformation is declared complete. That's one example of how this can work. An analogy is, if you want your organization to learn to ski, you could take them to the top of the mountain, line them up, blow the whistle, and off they go, and declare success because they're all moving down the mountain. But what arrives at the bottom is going to be fairly bruised and disillusioned group of people. So there's other patterns here as well. When anti-patterns, when we were getting started back in 2015, we were nudging up the price of agile coaches in London, taking on so many agile coaches in that particular context, starting too big. And actually what we've learned is starting small is the pattern here. You work with your early adopters, the most passionate people who will overcome any obstacle. And you create a platform. The thinking big is you're creating a platform with clear leadership sponsorship for those innovators to communicate to the rest of the organization. So we're thinking big, but we're starting small, and we're inviting those early adopters to then work with the early majority, work through the late majority, and create the social proof for a more of an S-curve type adoption of the change as you go. And that's without any plan or Gantt chart required. John.
Thank you, Myles. The third lesson learnt, the third pattern is invite over inflict. As we saw in that Mentee survey, the majority of people in your context, your feedback was you saw more of the infliction rather than invitation. And so this is about inviting participation. And in terms of the diffusion of innovation curve, Everett Rogers, 1962, 508 studies of how humans adopt change went into that diffusion of innovation curve. Normal distribution, innovators, 3 standard deviations on the left, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and then laggards on the right. And by starting with invitation, you're naturally going to attract the innovators on the left, the ones who have a risk appetite, the ones who are motivated to be first, to run with it, the ones to put your energy behind. The critics on the right, the laggards, listen to them. I've had people say to me in the past, over my dead body, am I going to change my way of working? Okay, fine. I'm going to leave you alone, leave you be. I'm going to listen to what you've got to say because you might have some good points in there. But what I've learned, unlearned and learned the hard way, I believe that the word convince or resistance should not enter your vocabulary if you're going about change the right way. It's not about convincing anyone of anything. And if there is resistance, it means that I would suggest that change is not being gone about in the best possible way. Peter Senge, Fifth Discipline, quote from there, the harder you push against the system, the harder it pushes back. So if there's resistance, it means you're pushing something against people who don't want it. So you invite participation, you focus on the outcomes, you understand what problems people have, that the problems that need addressing. And then you've got intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. It's from within. You're far more likely to be successful. And then you generate social proof. So crossing the chasm, Geoffrey Moore, to go from the early adopters to the early majority. Crossing that chasm, you have to generate social proof. And you have to do it in your context. You can have all of these great examples from other companies, but you have to do it in your context, in your company. Communicate, communicate, communicate 3 more times than you think you need to, and you're a third of the way done, in my opinion. Leadership behaviour will make it or break it is lesson learned number 4. And I saw this, we saw this in the Mentee Survey a few times. A number of times we saw leadership behaviour, we saw infliction. When you look at the 14th State of Agile report, the top 4 impediments to companies adopting better ways of working are all to do with behaviour and culture, and typically leaders at all levels, or managers. So my rule of thumb on this is the leadership team is team number 1. And that's the most senior leadership team possible. You'll have a bubble of agility, a bubble of better ways of working in an organization, and it will be the top of that bubble will be anchored by the most senior leader who's supporting better ways of working. And if that's not the top table, you'll have a bubble over here, and you'll have some challenges in the rest of the organization. Psychological safety, very clearly, Project Aristotle, Google, number 1 determinant of high-performing teams. As I'm sure most of you are aware, Amy Edmondson has written a book called The Fearless Organisation on this. I think she's kind of the go-to person on this, I think. Absolutely essential to have psychological safety, because otherwise people can't experiment, they can't try new things, and they will never improve. There was one business unit that I've worked with, which was led with a culture of fear. The leader mandated 2-week iterations on, something like 1,000 people. So they all did, like robots, 2-week iterations, but it was still kind of waterfall-esque, because it was 3 2-week iterations of analysis, 3 2-week iterations of development, 3 2-week iterations of testing. I did a floor walk, I did a Gemba walk, when I met the teams, spoke to them, and getting questions like, when we're on our 3rd development sprint and we've got a bug from the previous development sprint, what do we do? Oh God, sigh. But you can't blame people in that. It's not their fault. It's the command and control leader. So I spend a fair amount of my time coaching senior leaders on this. The next one is build the right thing. And this is the pivot from project to product. It's outcomes over milestones. This is aligning, going from your role-based silos in a traditional construct to multidisciplinary teams aligned by value. So the pivot to value streams, long-lived teams on long-lived products on long-lived value streams. That's the horizontal construct. Value streams are nested. You got the company, you double click on the company, you've got value. Typically, most companies, unless it's a one product company, you've got, for example, bank, investment bank, retail bank, credit card, double click on investment bank, you've got equity trading, debt trading, research, you've got nested value streams, and you've got long-lived teams on long-lived products on long-lived value streams. And then you've got outcomes. So instead of having projects, you've got multi-year outcomes, you've got in-year outcomes, you've got quarterly outcomes, you've got alignment, and you could be using the term OKR here, objectives and key results. This is a big mindset shift from Gantt charts, predicting the solution at the point of knowing the least, big upfront design, instead to writing an outcome hypothesis, quarterly, annual, multi-year, with alignment. This is a massive, massive mindset shift.
So this is build the thing right. We're talking governance, risk and compliance. At our previous employer, we were processing 30% of the UK's GDP every day. If you're in a regulated industry, you'll understand, therefore, the need for risk and compliance management, but it's not just regulated industries. GDPR makes data privacy a matter for everybody to be highly concerned about, as does cybercrime. So the question is, how do we accelerate and still stay safe? And the traditional governance processes, in our experience, are often getting in the way. They certainly were in that context, and with my clients now, I hear choruses of similar problems. Traditional governance is slow. We put a stopwatch on a Hello World application, going from code written, one line of code through to production, and we timed 20-man days of project management efforts, 3 elapsed months to navigate the overall governance system. So how do you change that so that it's not an impediment anymore, but organizations can still go fast and stay safe? One of the patterns here is achieving safety within safety, so psychological safety, so that there is a willingness to say stop, even if there's commercial pressures to proceed. And that can be a challenge in many organizations where the kind of the witch hunt culture that we hear about can get in the way from enabling that to happen. And across multiple industries where there isn't an openness, where there isn't an ability for staff to be honest about where the problems that they see, where that psychological safety isn't present, then that's a challenge. That's an anti-pattern. So number one is psychological safety, super important here. Then a shift in organizations. So John talked about the value streams, the anti-pattern that we're aware of, where we were before, but also in many other organizations is governance, risk, and compliance have many different silos. That there may be 12, 15, 20 different silos of governance organizations. It's quite fragmented. That's why it takes a project manager population to navigate it all. That's why it's slow. Shifting that to more cross-functional value stream based safety teams with everything in the team needed to support the governance questions that the value streams have is a key pattern for success. And a minimum viable process then, it has to be viable, but there needs to be a minimum viable process to ensure that the risks that are being identified are built into the delivery processes and the tools of the teams that are actually doing that work, so that it's not an off to the side process that's thought about at the end. It's actually an integral day-to-day part of the workflow of the teams. So those are the 3 key things around building the thing right.
Thanks, Myles. The next one is continuous attention to technical excellence. In the same way that Jez Humble and Dave Farley took the term of continuous delivery from the first principle of the Agile Manifesto, this one is from the 9th principle of the Agile Manifesto about paying continuous, and continuous is really the important word there, attention to technical excellence. This is all about slowing down in order to, over the longer term, go much radically faster. The anti-pattern, first anti-pattern we talk about is the flip of that, going faster, leading to going slower. If you're just trying to be a feature factory, just deliver the next feature after the next feature after the next feature, you will build up technical debt and you won't pay attention to the things that could improve you to go faster. Instead, you go slower, slow down, be deliberate about improving the way you work. Jim Kim in the Unicorn Project talks about high-performing teams elevating the job of making work easier above the work itself. That's pattern number 1. Anti-pattern number 2 is agile hollow shell, what we call it, what Martin Fowler has talked about, flaccid Scrum. Scrum, or the agile processes without any technical processes. Extreme programming was my introduction to agile, and extreme programming is that nice combination of technical practices like test-driven design and continuous integration and paired programming with the more Scrum-like practices of iterations and continuous planning. But so many applications of agile these days forget the fact that it has a technical side. I was speaking to someone in our HR department about our ways of working program, and he really was surprised to hear that agile came from software development and had technical aspects to it as well as work management. So instead, foster that continuous technical excellence, spend time in your agile transformation talking about the technical, the technology, the software aspects. Mark Anderson said software has eaten the world, and while we like to talk about business agility being applicable outside of software, fundamentally every business these days has an aspect of software to it, and be agile in that software delivery and development. Third one is at a higher level. It's about a misalignment of teams and architecture. People try to reorganize their organizations, their departments around value streams, but forget their legacy technology, pull people out and have different people working on the same software, trampling over each other. The pattern here is about organizing and architecting for flow, remembering Conway's law from the late 60s, looking at more contemporarily the work of Manuel Pleiss and Matthew Skelton around team topologies, and looking to evolve the two things together, both organization and architecture. If you get them both right in tandem, again, radical improvements in flow will follow. The last one is about tools over people. Many transformations which are focusing on things like cloud or DevOps think it's about installing a bunch of tools. You put Git in, you put Jenkins in, and you're done. That's nonsense. So the pattern is about smart people and smart teams being supported by their robot friends. Fundamentally, tools are there to get the drudge work out of the way of people, or the potentially fallible work out of the way of people, and let people use their brains to do creative and smart stuff with software. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon. So the last pattern is about creating a learning ecosystem. So this is chapter 8. It has a set of patterns as like the previous chapters, starting with traditional setup of information learning silos, when the setup is in role-based silos and the information is lost in multiple handoffs. According to Tom and Mary Poppendick, information could be lost up to 50% with each handoffs. The next is around outputs over outcomes, when the focus is on predetermined outputs rather than learning and pivoting to maximizing outcomes. The third one is about the bubble effect. So we have isolated information learning bubbles in different forms within organizations. And the teams within those information learning bubbles develop undesired behavior patterns. They develop a silo mentality, wanting to protect information and preventing and not sharing it with the rest of the organization. This leads to this limited discoverability. First of all, we don't know where those isolated islands are. So you could ask a question whether we live in a universe or multiverse. It is the same question. And also, once we know that, still, because those are with silo mentality, it's really hard to get sharing and information and learning across the organization. Applying a deterministic mindset to emergent domain, which is the underlying cause, is usually the fear of uncertainty. And the last anti-pattern is weaponized matrix, as John also mentioned. So for example, setting a target, focusing on setting a target, like for example, how agile are you? And setting a percentage, then overnight might we achieve that target. However, this is not focusing on actual intrinsic values, not focusing on outcomes and learning. And the corresponding patterns are optimized for learning. So optimizing for learning at each level, at individual team of team levels and organizational level, and establishing a nested learning structure with different cadences with built-in feedback loops. Connecting the bubbles, so dissolving those bubbles and connecting with various different ways with communities, with running awards. We've seen really good results and really awesome pivot when we started running award, and then because of behavior economics, people and teams started submitting their journeys, while previously when we wanted to collect, it was quite difficult. So submitting their journeys and submitting their success stories, we were able to share and connect people, so connecting the bubbles. Being comfortable with uncertainty, so unlearning the fear of uncertainty and encouraging a data-led experimental mindset. And lastly, pivoting from the weaponized matrix to measure for learning. So having the capability of a self-serve dashboard with drill-down capabilities, where for all colleagues at all levels, they can access, they can look, and they can do discovery of insights, correlations, to be able to continuously improve better value, sooner, safer, happier outcomes. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Zsolt. Thank you very much. So, as I said, we wrote a book, the four of us, which was published yesterday. I'm delighted to be able to say, and we did it to share the mistakes that we made. You know, we made mistakes. We made plenty of mistakes, because that's what it's all about. You know, experiments, trial and error. So we're sharing the mistakes that we made, and through the network that other organizations have made, using the language of anti-patterns and patterns. Again, there's no one size fits all. There are some cases where an anti-pattern for 9 organizations might actually be a pattern for 1 organization. So you have to apply it in your context. As per the purpose for AWA, to help create more humane ways of working. People are just happier. You know, I've time and time again come across teams with really shocking ways of working, to the point where it's like Stockholm syndrome, where people are worshipping their kidnapper. You know, I've inherited teams who were under such extreme pressure, like feast to famine in a traditional way of working evenings and weekends and everything. And I said, why are you still here? Why didn't you quit? And the answer was, because we're united through a common suffering. Oh my God. That's why they were staying. Jesus, that's not good. That's not good. And business agility over doing agile. So we saw that in the Mentee survey. We saw the skew to people, teams, organizations doing agile. And I think this is a maturity thing. It's a curve. You know, people will start with doing agile. Eventually people realize that just copying the routines is not necessarily going to move the needle on the outcomes, which is why it's important to focus on the outcomes. The audience for this book is leaders at all levels, in all roles, those helping and hindering. So the intent is it's a tool for people who want to help an organization. It's also a book to be bought for people who are unknowingly hindering, and being able to point out, look, here's some anti-patterns, and look, this is what we're doing, and maybe we shouldn't do this. Altogether, there's 52 anti-patterns and patterns in the book. And in order for us to be authentic around the climate and society, we are planting a tree for every 4 books sold, which is a 10 times carbon benefit via Tree Sisters. This is generally in the tropical rainforest, to try to keep the rainforest intact. And it also supports women in countries with low gender equality. So they're also supporting, from a society perspective, trying to support women in those countries as well. We are creating a better value, sooner, safer, happier community. If anyone is interested in joining, you can go to bit.ly/SSH community to sign up, or you can do a search on meetup.com. And that's going to be about shared learning. You know, just like this community, it'll be around shared learning. And I'm conscious we're on the hour. So, you know, if anyone wants to stay on for Q&A, I think we're more than happy to stay on for Q&A. Simon, I think probably back to you, just in terms of the timing, and if people have got a hard stop at 7, need to drop off, then I guess people can drop off. But Simon?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you for taking the time to share all the hard work that you've all put together. What really amazes me is the sheer scale of the work that you've all done across all these thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that you've actually represented or been working with or just got this data from. And that it really is amazing. So thank you for taking the time, not only for this evening, but also for actually putting it down in a book and giving this out there for people to read. Hopefully, people here will see the value in that and buy the book. So yeah, thank you. So big round of applause, everyone. So yeah, Q&A in terms of timing, yes, absolutely. Happy to go on as long as people have questions. But let's say, if let's say 20 minutes Q&A, something like that, and then if there's no questions, then we can always go and have some nice wine if you're in the evening, or go and have breakfast if you're in the morning. Yeah, so open it up to Q&A. Obviously, don't forget you're actually on mute. We'll give it a go at not doing the kind of facilitator thing. If you want to, thank you, I was just about to say, turn off the screen. If you want to just change your, if everyone just changes their view to gallery view, you can do this in Zoom. That means you see lots and lots of faces. You can also turn off people with no video content so that we can all see each other's faces a bit bigger. If you do want to have a question and answer, it'd be fantastic if we could see your face turning the video, but don't let that stop you if you're sitting there in your underwear. That's fine. You can still have your video off for that. But we welcome questions and answers. Now stop talking and over to you.
John, yes, if I'm first. John, on the fifth of the points that you brought out, I think it was build the right thing, and you said it came as a pivot, a lesson you learned. And I wrote this down, something you said, massive mindset shift. It required a massive mindset shift. In my experience, one of the hardest things that we have in business is to get that mind shift when so many people are threatened by the risk, the unknown, their careers, their fiefdoms, how they're defined. What do you have any insights on that at all, or is it in your book?
Yeah. Yes, Steve. And the massive mindset shift there is really going from a deterministic mindset to an emergent mindset. So from managers or leaders who think that by putting a Gantt chart together with big upfront design and big upfront solution, and we've committed to what it is we're going to build, thinking that that's actually going to happen, and that actually that's the best thing to do, to the mindset of optionality, maintaining options, and a focus on the outcome, not the output. So that's the mindset shift. Now, the second part to that, to answer your question, is in terms of how you get there and people feeling threatened in terms of fiefdoms and everything else, is back to the think big, start small, learn fast. So to get there, start really small, and then start even smaller than that is our learning, my personal learning. I've got the rule of one team, one experiment, one location in production. Nail it before you scale it. Get it working with one. It's an S curve, back to the diffusion of innovation curve, which is a normal distribution. When you draw a normal distribution as a cumulative probability distribution, it makes an S curve.
Yeah.
So you start with the innovators, you keep the gradient to change lower than you think you should for longer than you think you should, to get it working in your context. And then when it's working in your context with the most amount of antibodies, the most amount of treacle, the most amount of headwind, you can then slowly over time, you can start to increase the gradient. And then you can go faster, you can do more teams, but then you've got social proof because you've got it working in your context. You've got one area, you pick one team, one value stream who are already evangelical, maybe they've already been working with agile ways of working for the last 15 years anyway. Start there, prove it in your context, repeat. And if you hit an impediment, pause, alleviate the impediment, and you cannot predict or force the pace of change. You can only go at the pace that change goes at. You can nurture it, you can give it a tailwind, but you cannot predict it and you cannot force it.
Okay, thank you, John. Appreciate that.
Hi, everybody. Big fan. Thanks for being here and sharing. Your book, guys, is arriving in my home on Saturday, so I'm very much looking forward to get going. Great effort, congratulations. One question. In the trends you were mentioning when it comes to keeping track of the vectoral direction, what do you see being accountable in the organization for those? Is there an accountable body? Is the organization that should look at it transparently? What's your thoughts about this? Thank you.
So I guess I'll start it off, and then feel free to jump in, Myles or Zsolt or Simon.
Yeah.
So in terms of who's just to start that off, my view would be, you've got, and what we've done in the past and we're doing with other organisations is, you've got those trends at multiple levels. So you've got the trend around quality, value, flow, safety, and happiness at the team level, the team of teams level, the team of teams, the value stream hierarchy, the business unit, the org. And the beauty is, with the exception of value, you can aggregate them up and you can disaggregate them down. Value is unique, which is why you can't aggregate it up and disaggregate it unless everyone's focused on the same set of OKRs, which you don't want everyone focused on the same set of OKRs. So you can aggregate quality, value, flow, safety, and happiness, quality, safety, flow, and happiness up and down. And then it's the triumvirate of roles at every level. So when I say triumvirate of roles, what I mean is the product owner, the agile team lead, stroke delivery lead, stroke value stream lead, and the technical lead, stroke architecture owner, stroke CTO. So in your horizontal value stream hierarchy, nested value streams, the pattern is those three roles at every level. The what are we building? The how are we building it from a process and people perspective? And then the how are we building it from a technical perspective? Mobile, mainframe, Java, microservices, and so on. Those three roles at every level. And you have the data at every level. That's where the accountability is. So what we were surfacing at the senior level, with the kind of the top table level, we were surfacing the aggregate trends by business units, by top level value stream. So then it would be the head of the business unit, kind of the head of delivery, head of change, CIO, head of IT, whoever's got responsibility for delivery of the change budget, and the CTO. Those three roles at every level, and that's all the way down from the team level, all the way up to the top of the house. I don't know, Myles, Zsolt, Simon, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add that one of the patterns we found was to have an enablement team to actually surface that data in a consistent way, as John is describing. So you don't really want everybody rolling their own all across the organization, otherwise you cannot get clarity, you just end up with arguments. So there is value in having a capability that is leading ways of working in that sort of way, enabling ways of working to happen, but they're not accountable for the results. They're accountable for making the data to be surfaced in a clear way. So for example, with my personal experience is working with 8 of the most enthusiastic, pioneering directors across my organization, and talking to them about lead time. They have fervently different views about how to measure lead time, and it took about 7 weeks to get that nutted out with them about just how are we actually going to do it, guys, in a way that then you can roll up. And so creating that common language is part of what the enablement team is for, and supporting that with the right kind of technical lens to enable it to happen.
So one thing to add, and one big factor is actually unlocking measurability. So we talk about flow, we understand flow, that we know that visualizing flow is so important, but then how do we measure flow? And then at that point, it is a big question, because it means lots of behavior pattern changes. For example, whether we actually visualize flow, how we capture the work, whatever the tool we use for it. That's one. But also how do we connect that work with the actual inventory of the change production? And that's going through that and driving those discussions. That's we are seeing is a huge benefit. I'm a product owner for creating such dashboard, which is self-serve nature and with capabilities. So unless you unlock the measurability, you drive unlocking the measurability, you not get flow measures and any other measures. So that's a huge factor. And you cannot pull something off the shelf and drop it. The same thing, there is no one size fits all. So go through those behavior pattern changes in terms of visualization of flow and being able to the flow.
I'll throw in one last thing on this. It's worth spending time on this because fundamentally at the heart of better, value, sooner, safer, happy is measurement, it's data, and it's hard. Technical quality is what I care about. As Myles says, I can replay the examples where I am now. I'm working out how to measure lead time, but it is essential. You can agree and you do measure. Same is true with technical quality as well, starting to measure sort of leading or input measures around static code analysis, test coverage, as John said earlier, quality to do with incidents, availability, some of the metrics that have come out of Accelerate. They are invaluable and really hard, but absolutely worth their weight in gold.
And the beauty then, or when you have that in a dashboard, to build on what everyone has said, when you run that independently, so Myles's point, you know, the center of enablement, an independent team are pulling the data together. People can't game it. It's not about asking them to submit their own data. You've got an independent team pulling it together, so it can't be gamed. And then to build on Simon's point, what we did in the past is we had a click view dashboard, which meant you could drill in sideways. You could look at correlations. You could correlate. Let's look at the teams with the highest quality, the least failure demand, and the highest levels of engagement. We then looked at the opposite, the teams with the lowest quality, the longest lead time, and the least engagement, and we actually got them to speak to each other, which was really powerful. So, you know, right, hey, this team here, you go and speak to this team here, and just have a conversation. You know, there's no mandate or anything. That was really powerful. That's like cellular mitosis, where someone here from this team, you know, they know what they're doing, which is working really well. And so we ended up, you don't need to be a separate coach. We actually ended up building this kind of self-sustaining coaching from the best teams. I can see, Adrian, I can see you put a question in the chat and I saw you just wave your hand there, Adrian.
Yeah, I just thought it's a bit of a build on the Steve's point. But first of all, thanks guys. It's great to hear from you all again following the Barclays days and hearing the reflections on that. So it makes me smile. But I think it's the bit I'd like to explore more is this point about inviting people. So you're going through transformation because many organisations, and I might even say too many, do it just to save money or to reduce headcount, shall we say? How do you invite those people? So we've gone through the innovators, we've gone through those that are willing to go down this path. There's a bunch of people that are quite rightly, they're fearful because they recognise that actually they are not top of the queue to remain in the organisation. How do you invite those guys in?
In my personal experience, so one of the things that I really explicitly try to do in my current context, working with organizations, very explicitly make it about it's not a cost takeout. Super explicitly, because you know, the implication there, Adrian, of your question is that people will sabotage it if they think it's about cost reduction. Because, and this was a learning from Japan and organizations going on the lean journey in Japan, where organizations who were copying lean and made it about cost reduction, they found that colleagues were killing it for obvious reasons. They don't want to work their colleagues out of a job or themselves out of a job. So this is a very, like, I'm really firm on this. This is not negotiable. From my perspective, this is not negotiable. This is not about a cost takeout, because it'll die a death. And then it's just, you just invite people. You know, invitation is invitation. And I guess the majority of people, the majority of people probably want to participate. You know, the vast majority of people are keen to learn something new. The vast majority. Some people don't, and so okay, fine.
Yeah. you're giving people psychological safety, aren't you?
Exactly. Yes, totally, including psychological safety to not change as well, which is fine. Leave you be. You know, and what happens is 3 years later, 2 years later, they end up coming over anyway. You know, they end up sitting on the fence. This is working so well, demonstrable benefit, and then, you know, it's like what I've observed. Have you seen the guy doing crazy dancing on the hill? The fast follower video. I can see lots of nods. The fast follower video. So basically, it's the handful of people who are still left sitting down when there's 300 people dancing. What do? Some of them stay sitting down. Most of them get up and dance, or they'll go and sit in another field. Yeah, and that's just fine. That's just fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, John.
You're on mute, Simon.
That old chestnut. So I think we've got time for one more question. Would anyone like to ask one more, and then we'll probably close for the evening?
I have one more. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. Holger here from Hamburg, Germany. Thanks for the invitation. It was very good insights. So I think about the times right now, the Corona times, and a lot of people are sitting at home and so on. And I think about what is the impact, what we just seen about the patterns and anti-patterns in these times. For example, you said something about inviting people, leadership behavior, creating a learning organization that has all impact right now because they are sitting home. It's not so easy that the people come together. Do you think there are a lot of changes due to the patterns or the focus on the patterns, the impact on the patterns and anti-patterns due to the actual times? Was it clear question? Yeah, good.
Yes, it is. I think, you know, we mentioned, you know, 52 anti-patterns in the book. There's and patterns and anti-patterns. You know, these are always being discovered. Okay, so we're not at the end of it, and we're still learning what some of the patterns are. But I think from the lessons that have emerged so far in COVID, there've been some incredible success stories. Actually, some of the clients that I've spoken to tell me their ways of working have never been so good since COVID started, because it's such a good leveler. So that, you know, organizations with multi-building or multi-location are able to connect and actually do their stand-ups with everybody there, actually have meetings more effectively than they have been able to before. So in some ways, it can improve things. Other organizations I've seen, you know, some government departments where it's what has previously taken 9 months to achieve has been achieved in 3 weeks. And because suddenly when things really have to happen, there is a willingness to actually, you know, override all other processes which seemed immutable before. And that starts to create a precedent. Well, if we can move that quickly, if we can make that happen now, well, what can we learn from that? So I think a huge set of learning experiences for many organizations about some of the changes they can make, whether it's risk and reg, whether it's how people are organized. You know, one of the clients I was working with, they said, well, in their organization, the teams that are already working in new ways have felt more secure because they're a bonded team. They're actually able to help each other far more effectively than some of the more sort of project-y command and control type environments that they also have in the same organization. So the agile teams have been much more sustainable in these conditions. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of success stories that we can draw on. I think we're only just at the beginning of trying to really articulate those in terms of patterns and anti-patterns from this, but lots of good. Mm-hmm. John or Zsolt, any other thoughts?
Just to echo what Myles said around in the pandemic, organizations have found themselves working really well at the beginning. And it's like, how do we bottle the positive? You know, like coming together at the beginning of the pandemic, getting stuff done. Mm-hmm. And then I think on the flip side, very intentionally needing to build in wellness. You know, very explicitly building in wellness breaks, mindfulness, time out, stepping away, no meeting Fridays, So something that personally that I do in my calendar, I put in deliberate wellness breaks. Intentional, because otherwise my calendar will just fill up. So I put time in to step away, go for a walk, look at nature, which, you know, normally you're walking through a building or you're commuting, you know, so build those. I actually, personally, I still do my walking commute at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, just to kind of keep the exercise going. I don't get on a train anymore. So anyway, that's just another thought to add to the mix.
Fantastic. I think that's a fantastic note to end on, actually, the wellness and getting those breaks in. It's absolutely brilliant. Was there anything that the four authors wanted to say in closing? And then we'll wrap up for the evening. Oh, we good?
Thank you very much for having us, and thank you very much for attending.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for giving this amazing talk and answering questions. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you all again soon at the next event or some other activity that we all get involved in. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
See you soon.